In 5, 4. Hey, we're live. Okay.
All
Welcome
right.
to Around the Lens, a weekly visual journalism roundtable podcast where a visual journalist guy discuss our career field. I'm your host, David J. Murphy, a visual journalist currently based out of Charleston, South Carolina.
And I'm your co-host, Zach D. Roberts. I'm a photojournalist who works in New York and Alaska. I've been working for BBC, The Guardian, but most recently, most of my work has been done in the Village Voice.
We are recording this, episode 16, live, March 14th, 2016, and our panelists are Abe Van Dyke and Jamie Rose. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves? Abe, why don't you go first?
All right, my name is Abe Van Dyke. I'm a photojournalist based out of Waukesha, Wisconsin, which is just outside Milwaukee. I've been doing this good 8 years or so now, most famous for doing the Slender Man stabbing, which now there's an HBO documentary at South by Southwest, which is just flooding me with people, hey, is the image? And I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, that's pretty much what I do, along with just spot news in the area.
And people should know that this is your second appearance on the show.
Yes.
And you are, by the way, the first ever guest who has been on 2 shows. So congratulations.
Yay!
But I wish I had a sound effect to signify.
I believe we banned you from using those sound effects. So that's official show policy now.
Oh well.
You lost the privilege.
I was like a little kid who had the toys. Jamie, how about yourself? Who are you, Jamie?
I'm Jamie Rose. I am the COO of Momenta Group, which runs Momenta Creative and Momenta Workshops. So we do workshops all around the world teaching documentary photographers how to work with nonprofits primarily, but we also have travel documentary workshops where we teach people how to be smart citizens around the world when you're doing documentary coverage.
Cool. How long has Momenta been around?
We are going into our 10th year.
Oh my gosh.
So
Wow,
exciting.
10 years.
I know.
Have you been with the company
Yeah.
the entire time, or have you recently been part of the company?
I'm one of the 3 co-founders. It
awesome.
was started with Chris Anderson, Seth Butler, and myself.
How'd you get started? What was the impetus?
Well,
Where'd the idea come from?
The idea is solely Chris Anderson's. He had the vision that a lot of documentary photographers were going out and working in the field doing projects on their own, and as the fourth estate started to crumble around us, and this concept of having this wonderful esprit de corps where we could all get together and work on projects overseas and have this great network was starting to fall apart as the newspaper industry stopped sending people to go do coverage like that. And so he realized that there was a void in the teaching institution to get people actually in the field covering these type of stories and working on these types of projects. So we went in and we realized that there were different business skills and different business needs that were necessary to teach photojournalists so they could learn how to be sustainable in a freelancing market. What we do now is we train people in, the visual aspects of storytelling, but we also have a really dedicated program towards business skills. So every workshop that we have talks about how to make money doing what you love. And a lot of that has to do with working with nonprofits and working with corporate clients, working with independent projects that you want to do, how to fund your own projects, all sorts of nerdy stuff. I could go on forever.
Yeah, I say the business aspect is definitely, the most important nowadays because, there aren't as many standard type jobs out there, so you have to figure out how to make money some way, right? So I think that's pretty important.
And I think, as we were coming up through the ranks, there were people who were mentoring a lot of those of us who started as freelance. So I was a freelancer for a really long time in Washington, D.C., covering politics and news, and then I started to do more humanitarian coverage overseas, and I didn't know what I was doing. If it hadn't been for John Harrington, who wrote the book Best Business Practices for Photographers, being a mentor to me on how to sustainable, I probably would have just kept bumping along, making mistakes along the way. So having really good mentors taught us that there are a lot of journalists out there who need mentors, not just in how to be a better storyteller, but how to keep telling stories because you're sustainable.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Do you guys do a lot of video workshops, or is this mostly photo?
We are actually doing our first solely video multimedia workshop this year in DC with
Nice.
AJ Shavar from the New York Times multimedia staff. He's going to be the instructor, and then we've got a couple of other pretty outstanding people joining him. And every workshop, you have the option to do that. So we do have a lot of people who've come through our ranks, like Andrew Reineson, Bob Miller, you know, those guys all came in and did multimedia video. Sophia Allison, who's actually my pick of this week. So we have...
Don't reveal the pick yet.
See, you shouldn't let me talk so much about this because I get excited.
I'm just messing.
So yeah, we do. We do a lot of video, and we do. We have noticed that there's a lot more narrative storytelling aspects to it, but we try to encourage people who've never even done that before, just take an audio recorder out and learn this really fun way that you can add another layer to your storytelling, which I love audio. I think it's an untouched medium a lot of times by producers.
Yeah, I always, I carry around the audio recorder, but I don't really use it as much. I used to play around with multimedia storytelling, the old sound slides to make my videos and to make my stories, but I've sort of moved on to full filmmaking, just shooting video, and then if sometimes I'll throw a photo in there, we'll do a Ken Burns effect to it, and that's kind of the extent of, I've kind of moved beyond multimedia storytelling to straight video, but it's interesting. I definitely think there's ways to tell a story in so many different ways. So I'm glad you guys are exploring that.
The gallery industry, especially the art world, has been doing such cool stuff with audio. I've been going to different gallery shows around the world, and they'll have really cool audio components that are in it. Put your headphones on and go look at all these beautiful still images, but they'll have quotes or even just like diegetic noise that's happening around it from the audio recording, from the actual still photographers, and there's really cool stuff going on. But I love the fact that everyone's being really accepting of the fact that we can start telling stories as still photographers in a lot of different ways. And we could do it on Instagram, we could do it on video, we could do it on audio, documentary, all sorts of
Yeah, there was a story recently about how the Instagram long-form storytelling, I forget if it may have been on Pixel, but basically they would post a photograph and then post like a 200-word caption or 2,000-word caption with the photograph. So I thought that was a neat way to, tell a longer story in what's normally a very quick sort of medium to, I guess, absorb media.
Have you guys been following I don't know if you're on Instagram, but if you're following Viewfind, they've been having a lot of guest photographers come on, and they'll do whole portfolios over the course of a week, and it's just great to watch a daily feed of like, oh, I kind of forgot that story was being told because there's so many things coming at me, and you can kind of see someone's progression. And I think Instagram's going to be a really interesting company to watch in the next year.
Cool. Yeah, we'll have to get onto that Instagram bandwagon. It seems like every week we have something new that we're attaching around the lens to. So I think I did make something with it, but I don't know. I barely have time to do this. So all that other social stuff, I get to it when I get to it. All right, so speaking of get to it, let's get to the show and start talking about the topics we got to talk about for this week. So our first topic of the week relates to another photographer getting arrested over doing their job. So a photographer by the name of Ricardo de Antria, 65, he was arrested on suspicion of resisting and obstructing a law enforcement officer, a misdemeanor, but according to the citation issued by the Simi Valley Police. So, the photographer was sitting in their car. They were working on some photographs they had shot of the Nancy Reagan funeral, and apparently they looked suspicious because they had a hood over their head, and they were trying to do this photo editing with the hood to block out the sun, but he looked suspicious. So some cops came up to him, and then he was, I guess, not cooperating with them. So the cops basically arrested him. So, what do you guys think of this sort of thing happening? Is this a event that is in, are we being oppressed as documenters? Is this another example of the police oppressing us, or is this an example of somebody who basically just should have worked with police and explained who they were and what they were doing, and they could have been, gone on their way? Or was he right in sort of giving the police a hard time? Why should I have to identify myself? I'm just doing my job. I'm sitting on the side of the road in my car. So what do you guys think of this? Zach? You dealt with the police. What do you think?
It's I've had some dealings with the police occasionally. I love if you read through the coded language of the police officers, this is kind of the standard thing if you read enough of these stories. Where first off, that he was ticketed for suspicion, not even actually resisting arrest, but suspicion of resisting and obstructing a law enforcement officer, which is essentially the kind of the standard operating procedure of you're bothering me, I want to put handcuffs on you sort of situation where I'm going to finish this situation. I don't know what else to do as a police officer because I'm completely and totally uninformed on how to deal with the press, which seems to be a continuing problem, which is, again, why, not that we didn't promote them enough last episode, but the NPPA is very important. If you're not a member, you should be a member because they run programs on how to deal with the police and vice versa. They're trying to train police officers. The LAPD is kind of famous for problems with the press. A friend of mine who's a cartoonist and journalist, Ted Rawl, was actually just, amusingly enough, fired from the LA Times because the LA Times or the LAPD claimed that he lied about his dealing with a police officer, and in fact an audio tape proved otherwise later on. But I read this as basically the standard kind of police just being bothered by press doing their job, which is something for some reason it bothers them so much that we have to be near either a crime scene or an incident scene or whatever, and they just want to get rid of us, so they arrest us and rant.
Okay,
yeah.
Jamie, what do you think?
Well, I don't hate cops, so I can understand how tensions would be really high, especially in California right now, about a really high-profile event and someone sitting in a car who looks suspicious, and San Bernardino sort of changed the way I think cops in Southern California act. However, I think the media in general needs to start being a little bit more comfortable and starting dialogues with police in their region. When I was in D.C., we were having, in fact, this actually ironically happened right after the Reagan funeral of President Reagan, and there was a lot of problems with those of us in the press corps who were going into positions, like we were going out on the street into our positions, and the police weren't letting us through lines. They were saying, no, you have to go with the general public. It was just a huge mess. And so Jeff from the press office came in and said, hey guys, look, we're going to have a sit down with the Capitol Police and have the journalists and the police sit down, and you guys can ask them any questions you want, and we can start this dialogue moving forward that isn't so aggressive. And I think that was really helpful. I don't know why every single NPPA chapter and every single newspaper in any hometown doesn't sit down with their police chief and say, let's talk about what to do when we're in these really high stress situations and you've got a bunch of people. Credential them, credential everybody. If there's a big event, give everybody the same press badge, just like, we did in DC for the inauguration and for debates and everything like that. So there was one press badge, and that was the one that was it. And if you had it, they left you alone. And that's kind of the way it was supposed to work. But when we see these, and this isn't new. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the police can get really creative. I mean, Carolyn Cole was arrested in Florida for inciting to riot or some craziness like that because she was supposedly throwing rocks during a demonstration. I don't know if anyone else has a lot of extra hands when you're carrying your gear, but I don't think that's possible. I mean, Carol Guzzi was very famously arrested during the World Bank protests. Last 2 years ago, the Huffington Post and Washington Post reporters were arrested during Ferguson for failure to follow officers or something like that. And it speaks to, I think, the value of NPPA and, Mickey, Mickey, who is always, advocating for everyone's rights. But I would also take a quick look at the Poynter Institute. Back in 2002, the reporter wrote Tips for Cops, and it's great. Like, it's actually about someone who was on the police beat in a newspaper, but how to go about doing this in a really respectful way and making sure everybody can do their job. But I know that I've had police, grab my camera, pull my lens down, do all that really offensive stuff. I've had Secret Service dogs accidentally drool all over my gear. Like, there's lots of different ways that, they can prevent us from doing our jobs. But I think the first thing needs to be dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no reason why, you can't engage with them. They're just people doing their job. Do they do their job right all the time? Probably not. But, Abe, what do you think about this?
Well, with the dialogue, I kind of want to go with the Ferguson mindset of people started really being educated that you can photograph and record police, and it started, or at least what I've noticed is protests now. It's not just about photographing and making their cause look good. It's about showing everything that's going on, which is great from a journalistic standpoint, but it also sets, well, I'm legally allowed to do this, yada, 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 and more people are, well, screw off, I can do it, it's my right. And I think that even though professionals might sit down with the police department, that rhetoric and that just die hard, I'm going to do it because I'm able to, I'm not sure that that's going to work. And I think that those people are what are frustrating the police. And that even if they come across a professional, like at the Reagan funeral, that they're sick of it. And that's why they're going a bit over and above what they should be doing. I mean, everybody can be courteous, but when you get bombarded 10 times a day, I can understand, especially in a high security situation where they're just like, nope, I'm done.
Yeah. We have, go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, obviously in this instance, from what I read, I mean, this is obviously his experience is different than being in a protest. He was just sitting in his car. Yeah. So the commentary I've read about this is that, he was being sort of disobedient or whatever to the police, or the police were. It seemed like it was a relatively tame engagement, and he was overreacting, and so the police reacted to that. But if he had just cooperated, then there'd be no issues. But obviously, we weren't there, so we can't talk about what was going on between those two instances. But I know that I share the sentiment, or at least I agree with what you're saying with regards to the police being perhaps short of patience, having to deal with people who perhaps have a blog or a webcam or a phone with a periscope on it saying that they are obviously journalists, photojournalists, visual journalists, and essentially them having to compete with people who have, press credentials and press badges, and them just being like, listen, you all are kind of irritating me, so you're all arrested. Like, well, who was I think it was a CBS videographer or broadcaster, a cameraman who was arrested at a Trump rally last week or something. Anybody remember that story?
Christopher Morris, who was detained?
The Time magazine?
No, that wasn't the guy who was choked. It was I believe it was at the canceled Trump.
Oh, the CBS event in Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a reporter. But I think this speaks to dialogue as well and educating yourself at the same time. Like, I don't know if any of you, I'm sure none of you have had any issues with gear going through TSA before, but I've been on many a plane where they've said, I'm sorry, you can't take that bag with you in the overhead, we're full or whatever. And I even had to take like every single Leica camera and lens and everything I had and like carry it onto a plane in like a shopping bag because they told me that the rolly bag wouldn't go. And come to find out, there's actually a TSA statute that says that if you are carrying equipment for media coverage, you are allowed to put your bag up and they have to take someone else's off, just like medical equipment and other things like that. I had no idea, and I printed that out and I took it with me on every single flight. It's in every single camera bag that I have. It's in our huge lighting kit, you know, all this other stuff. And a lot of people don't educate themselves on what their rights are or what they're supposed to be able to do. And I think that's where the dialogue comes in. I mean, everyone has the right to free assembly. It's in the Constitution. So we should be allowed to know that these events are going to be taking place, know that there's going to be just a god-awful amount of people, and be able to identify ourselves in a polite and, you know, non-aggressive way. And I think that there are a lot of protesters out there who don't do that and make it bad for everybody, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, they want to make it bad for the rest of us. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I mean it's a continued problem, because I mean the problem with whether it be dialogue or whether it be, you know, what our actual rights are, is that when it comes to the heat of the moment kind of protests or events, you know, big security events, they seem to kind of those rights kind of seem to disappear, and you know, if we're to do our job, we have to kind of push that line, because, well, we have to do our job, and not only is it we have to do our job, but it also is our right to do the job. But we have to argue with this random police officer who is very clearly usually uninformed. I mean, I come from New York City for most of my protest shooting and everything like that, and I also work in Anchorage, Alaska, and Anchorage, Alaska, the police departments are amazing. Because I mean, it obviously has a lot to do with the fact that they don't have to deal with 850,000 members of the media that are all credentialed in one way or another. They don't have to deal with, photography as a right, bloggers with their made-up, printed-out press passes and everything like that. They don't have to deal with that stuff. But in New York, the big problem I have is that the only acceptable ID is one that the police department itself hands out. Which is something I continually talk about and continually wish that the MPPA would deal with, but that's a longer issue. And so...
Well, actually, that's interesting. What do you see as the issue with the police-issued press badge?
The police... I mean, the idea that literally the state gets to decide who is a functioning member of the media. I mean, I don't like going down the line so easily, but I mean, like, that sounds like... I don't know, it sounds like fascism. I mean, it sounds like the literal description, if you look on Wikipedia or you look on the dictionary, of a police state. And New York State is, to some level, a police state. It has been since 2001. The police run the city. They in fact, you talk to any mayor who's ever tried to make any changes, de Blasio for one, he knows what happens. The police decide to just go home. And so I mean, like, New York City is kind of its own enigma. It's its own thing compared to even LA or DC or any other city I've ever worked in, including Chicago, which is famously terrible in its dealing with the media, or its police media kind of connections. But
the press pass you get from the police, that's just for New York City, right? That's not for the whole state, is it?
Yeah. No, it's not. I mean, it's basically, since it's a government-issued ID, it kind of works at a higher level in other cities. I know Chicago, I think, has something familiar. I'm not sure if DC does. But the big problem is that it's actually a member. It's actually a random. It's a media police officer who has no media training, doesn't know anything from anything, and they look over your stories and then decide if you are an official member of the media. Gothamist, which is one of the biggest New York City publications now in existence, I mean, it's probably edges out, the Post for web traffic, had to bring them to, I think, state level court to actually get press passes issued to their journalists, because they don't like the stories that they run. I had to deal with that when I was arrested. It was during Occupy Wall Street, and I was arrested while I was working as a journalist. And I actually had to bring in printed out stories where I was published to show to a district attorney, who the district attorney then had to announce in open court that I was an official photographer. I was a professional photographer working for media in New York City, and then my charges were dropped. But that took 6 months. And luckily I didn't have my cards deleted, but I know other photographers who had their cards deleted while they were being processed. I didn't get to file until the next day, so I lost any chance of my photos being sold or anything like that. So I mean, I'm bad on this issue, so I'm very biased.
But this is also speaking to, I think, the inability for. I'm sorry, Abe. Would you like to say something?
Oh, go ahead.
I feel like this also speaks to this concept that the media is a really fluctuating and changing environment. We have bloggers, we have vloggers, we have Instagram personalities, we have people who are guest editors and writers and reporters, and all of these people are coming out to record because the digital world has expanded our ability to consume media in so many different ways. But at the same time, our conflicts that we're having internally, I think, as organizations, you know, people are fighting over, is it NPPA or ASMP, or are these different organizations fighting for our rights? And Mickey is one of the loudest voices that's out there. And if you guys don't know who I'm talking about, it's the, is he the legal counsel for NPPA?
We actually had him on a show
such a lawyer.
way back in the day.
He's actually
Like
legal
episode
counsel.
3.
He's legal counsel for Around the Lens. He doesn't know that yet, but he is.
He's pro bono.
Yeah.
Also, little known fact, he's so fine, he blew my mind.
Oh, God.
Nice.
And he's the general counsel for the National Press Photographers Association, and he can't be the only person who's out there speaking out about this in an intelligent and, you know, informed way. And I feel like a lot of the infighting that goes on with everyone trying to classify what counts as media today and fight with each other about who is acceptable or not. I mean, I think David Hobby considered to be an expert when Strobus came out and everyone realized, like, this blog has more followers than, you know, the New York Times. Like, we should really start paying attention to what these bloggers are doing and accept them into this core and protect them equally as much as we're trying to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Abe? Sorry.
Oh, no, mine goes back to Zach. I was going to say it's not any better in Milwaukee, because when I was arrested covering a protest, same exact thing. They just slam you in and see you later.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a problem. I mean, it's a problem in a lot of cities because they don't have the training. And Mickey and the NPPA, we just had the actually, I believe, interim executive director of NPPA on last week, and he's talking about how they're running programs with police officers, police departments, and I think that's super useful. And I would actually, if I got to find out from him if there's a way to donate directly to that or participate, because I would support that so much more. Because I mean, in New York City, like, compare the two massive different cities. You have Anchorage, Alaska, 250,000 people, very rural, you know, very Alaska, and then you have New York City, which is, well, New York City, and there's no way I can ever. People always say, it's like, well, you got to build a relationship with the police department. You know, they get to know your face. I'm like, talk to
take him out for a date.
What's his name? No, I'm trying to remember, the New York Times photographer who got arrested after and was filming because he was photographing I think a fire or something like that. And he's a freaking established New York Times photographer. He covers events like this. He's probably one of the most known photographers in New York City, at least to, like, people to run in the beat kind of beat stories. And he got arrested and he got detained, and it was a huge issue. And they tried to take his cameras away from him, and they wrecked one of his lenses. And so, like, I don't even have a chance in to ever establish a relationship. And in Anchorage, it took me, I think, 3 stories, and luckily the chief of police knew who I was because I was writing for one of the biggest blogs up in Alaska, and it was a moment. But in New York City, there's no way, but there's also very little way that I could have ever gotten a press pass in New York City because of the way that they define, the small, tiny way that they define what is acceptable stories in a number of months. If you come in and out of the city, there's just no way you can get a credential, because you have to have, I think, 6 stories in 6 months published in some place that they accept. as a thing that prove your necessary. You need to be able to cross police lines to cover the story. So you literally need to break the law.
To get White House credentials.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, the thing is though, that's, I mean, I'm actually going through some of the credentials right now to get into conventions, and it's like, and yeah, you need to get background checks and everything like that, but that you have access to the president and documents and things like that. This is just literally to cover, so I can cover the Macy's Day Parade, Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, or cover whatever. I have to literally break the law according to what they define as the law to get the credentials.
Well,
and it's amazing.
I think we also need to accept the fact that this is along the lines of sensitivity training at this point. It can't happen with. I mean, I can't even imagine how the hell many cops are there in New York.
60,000.
Right. So I'm sure that at least.
So Zach, all you have to do is get to know them on a personal level, and you'll be good.
Just 1% of those guys is difficult to get those, and this is how. I mean, this type of media treatment and the way that the media is treated by the cops is equally probably as detrimental sometimes as the way that the media treats the cops. I mean, imagine in one of these protests if somebody was actually injured, or something that a police officer could have done to prevent someone from being injured. The media would be all over that. What was the chief of police thinking? Why did they do it this way? So of course they have this antagonistic relationship. And trust me, I covered the Bush presidency primarily for the New York Times. I know what it's like to have somebody not like you when you show up. So at the same time, I think we should be considering the fact that it took a really long time for sexual harassment to be something that people talked about in the workplace. This is something that, we're trying to get into the workplace of these police officers to say, how can we find the right way to work with each other?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's definitely going to be a long-standing issue. Probably isn't going to go away. But the more we talk about it, the better it can get. I mean, just got to open that dialogue.
We didn't resolve it?
We didn't. Oh, okay. Let's figure this out, guys. Let's figure this out. Let's solve it. Let's bring a plan over to the police station.
So for our next segment, we'll be dealing with racism, and then after that, world hunger. And so we figure by 9:30, 9:45, we'll have most of them solved. So just make sure you guys hang on.
If you can solve all the world's problems before the show is over, I really appreciate it. That way, next week we have nothing to talk about. But our next topic actually relates to one of our panelists. He is someone who went on a shoot and had a little bit of an anxiety attack, I'd say, probably, and had a little difficulty doing his job. But he talked about it and kind of raised an issue about anxiety in the workplace that I think merits discussion, which is why he's on the show. So, Abe, why don't you go ahead and tell us about your experience?
Okay, so I was covering, let me double check, I can't remember the date. It was early February. The
story was published on February 15th, so probably a little bit before that.
February 11th. Yep. It was a Democratic debate in Milwaukee with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. And I've done this before. I've been around the ropes. I've photographed the president multiple times, other run-ups in 2012, and I didn't have an issue, but I've lately had an issue with anxiety. And for me, it's something that it can be fine 1 minute and the next minute not fine. But I knew this was a high-profile thing that I needed to be there. I couldn't go anywhere. It was just set. The thought of the Trump, his little corrals, I know that he's coming to Milwaukee. I'm just going to do the protesters outside. No way I can just be locked into a cage like that. But, yeah, for this event, I was fine, and then the anxiety just started rising up, and then just the amount of people and the sensory overload and the thought that, I understand that everybody next to me is going to get the same exact shot, but to me it's the whole I can't fail type mentality. So I went into it and I just decided I couldn't do it. So I backed out, went home, wrote the article, and put it out there. And that's been one of the best things that I've done. Maybe not for my career. I mean, I'm not getting people saying, hey, you're the guy that freaked out and wrote about it. But I have had dozens upon dozens of people either email me or send messages and tell me their stories. In fact, I'm still in communication with one individual who that person seemed, at least on my end, pretty close to wanting to be pulling a trigger because they didn't have anybody to talk to. I've helped to find, who they can talk to in the local area and hopefully set on the right path. But I think that people are just ashamed of it, and I was for a very long time. I went the route of, typical jock mindset of, nope, I'm tougher than this, I can push through life, but, sometimes you have to seek help, and it's okay to talk about. That's the number one thing that I saw, at least for the couple days that the article was circulating online, is that people are actually talking about mental health and understanding that, it's not a dirty subject. It's the same thing if somebody has diabetes and they need to take an insulin shot while working. You should be able to feel comfortable at least telling somebody that, hey, I've got a problem, this is why. So it was a really intense experience at the time, but I've gotten more out of it personally by the people reaching out and acknowledging that, hey, look, I've had a 35-year career, and I have the same exact thing as you do. Here, try this. And it's just all these people suffering in silence that is really kind of sad. And I want to see more people talk about it.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, you obviously said this wasn't great for your career. So what has kind of been the fallout of this? I mean, obviously you've gotten the personal engagement, but has it affected your ability to get jobs or get hired?
The phone hasn't been ringing as often, but I'm putting that partially towards the weather, I'm hoping. But I also know that it's something that if I ask for a press credential through a higher-end agency, they're going to go with somebody else possibly before me, just based upon, me stepping out of line here and talking about a problem. So they'd rather take the safer bet, I feel.
After reading your article, my mom is a mental health professional, and she and I have talked a lot about like some of the wacky assignment issues that we've had. But do you choose your assignments based on your knowledge of what makes you, feel claustrophobic and feel anxiety? Do you feel like that's something that you would want to do?
See, right now I'm being much more careful, and I'm in therapy. I'm trying a few different medications. I have decided, like, one thing that I love covering every year in Milwaukee is Summerfest. Well, you've got hundreds of thousands of people there. Last year I went fine every day except for one day, and that one day I just couldn't do it. But I am being more selective, like with Trump coming to Milwaukee. I know that I'm not even going to apply to go in. Just like Obama just came to town, and I didn't even apply. It just, the thought of some of these assignments, I just can't, at this point, see myself doing. But I don't want it to necessarily bite me 5 years down the road when I'm, perfectly fine. I just want it to be accepted and acknowledged that, hey, you got a problem, this is why. I can still deliver something, but I am more choosy now about what I'm willing to do or not.
Well, I mean, you know your limits now, or
Yeah.
at least you have a better idea of what your limits are. And, I mean, hopefully you're on the road to recovery, so to speak, or at least, I don't know, do you have a program or something that you're trying to do to kind of help you get overcome these issues?
Well, right now, I've been in therapy for about 2 years now, and that was fine. I struggled forever, and they finally convinced me to do medication and gave me different tools to work with in the moment. But I tell you, sometimes just the overload, like at the convention, it just washes over you, and there wasn't a thing that I could do about it. It's kind of like somebody in their fear of small spaces. just they can't do it. That's kind of how my brain reacts. Even when I came on this podcast last month, I was super, super nervous until just coming on. I mean, right now I'm wrapping a rubber band around my finger because it's just something that I can do to calm myself down. And yeah, there's a bunch of different techniques that you can learn how to manage it in the moment, but it's mainly needing to just slow down, and in some situations you can't. Middle of a protest, people are firing guns and tear gas. You can't just slow down and be like, hey, guys, give me a minute, all right?
Right, absolutely. Hey, could you guys just hold the protest on?
Yeah.
1 minute, hold the cheer. Okay, and go ahead. So, obviously, photography can be a very emotional, or visual journalism can be a very emotional act. Jamie, Zach, have either of you ever, not necessarily obviously felt maybe the level of anxiety that Abe has, but have you ever been sort of overwhelmed by the moment, or maybe when you were starting out, overwhelmed by perhaps producing work and having it maybe not meet expectations, or by your employer perhaps?
Jamie, go ahead.
Well, Abe, I'll tell you a personal story. The very first, when I went to go do my thesis in Israel, I covered a bus bombing really early on, and I lived really close to the hospital. And my roommate said, if you ever hear a whole bunch of sirens going off, that means that Hamas has bombed something, and just follow the ambulances. And I was like, all right. And so I did. I was one of the first reporters on scene, and it was graphic beyond words. And I called my mom, shrink mom, because I was like, hi, I know it's like ridiculously early in the morning for you, or late at night, or whatever it was. And I said, I'm just so freaked out, and I can't believe what I just saw, and this was a really horrific thing. And I, under my breath, was like, I need a drink. And she's like, absolutely not. Whatever you do, don't drink a drop of alcohol. Go have tea, go have anything. Do not make that your instant coping mechanism. And it was like probably some of the best advice I ever got early on in the field as a 20-nothing-year-old. And at the same time, she said a phrase that we say to people in Momenta Workshops all the time. I mean, people in Momenta Workshops end up crying often because of the things that they've seen. And it can be a really powerful and emotional experience to be behind the lens and then drop the lens and realize and look around you and say, as my mom said, you have to remember that this is happening to you too. And we tell our students that all the time. This is happening to you too. And you wouldn't be a human being. This concept of objective journalism, I think, is just crap in certain situations. Like, I've had guns going off around me and been terrified and looked at people and said, I am scared out of my brains and I cannot do my job. I mean, it's the reason why I thought I wanted to be Andrea Bruce when I grew up, and I went into my first gun battle and was like, no, get me out of here. I never want to cover war again. This is horrible. And I think that in that regard, years later, I was in New Orleans for our Project New Orleans workshop, and we had a student who had come in from overseas, and he said, can I interview everybody on staff and ask you guys a bunch of questions for this like video thing I do back home? And we said, sure. And it was the day that the Boston bombings had happened, and my sister is an Ironman. She's outrageous. She's amazing, and she's done, I think 30 marathons by now. I have sat at the finish line of I don't even know how many marathons. And when it happened that day, which is the last day of our workshop, it was just so overwhelming. And then I started to see the photographs coming back from the incredibly brave journalists who were there and covering it. And this student asked me, what was probably the worst assignment or the most powerful assignment you ever had? And I started bawling in front of his video camera. I was so embarrassed. Like, I'm not a crier. I'm just not. And I started bawling because I instantly went back to bus vomiting because what I saw all day long from Boston looked just like that. And I said, if you'll excuse me for just 1 second, I need to go to the powder room. And I went and I was like, what is wrong with you? And I realized that was a total, post-traumatic stress. I don't know how you want to classify it, but it's happening to you too. And I feel like we as journalists are supposed to be really hard-edged, especially all those young female photographers out there who don't want to show any kind of weakness or anything like that. And I know I was like that, and I think it's incredibly brave when people like you stand up and say, hey, I'm effing human, you guys, and some things bother me, and I'm okay to it, and strong enough to admit it, and the rest of you guys who just push it down are going to have to face it one of these days. So it's very brave of you, and I applaud you for it.
Well, thank you very much. I mainly wrote it just for myself, and the fact that other people have been able to get something out of it is more than I hoped for. I mean, nobody goes to my blog. I mean, there's been 3 stories, and people go once. So it was mainly for me. And I actually used Facebook when my mom was dying, and used that as an outlet. I put that on my website as well. But that was my way of just stopping the bullshit of I watched a thing on James Knockway early on, and I'm like, I can do it. Nothing's going to bother me. And I didn't let anything bother me. And actually talking through it right now, I used to talk over things that I would see and experience with my mom. And I only started having an anxiety issue once she died. So I lost that outlet. And now, at least now, I've found a new outlet to express myself and talk about things. But yeah, that just, hey, revelation on the internet.
How about you, Zach? Any major emotional hurdles or you've had to go through, or?
Yeah, I mean, after, one of the reasons I talk about police kind of so passionately is that when I was trampled and beaten up and more by the police during Occupy, kind of and then kind of the collective every night for probably 3 months going down there and watching police and whether plain clothes and in other words just beat the living crap out of young kids doing nothing other than protesting, usually very, very peacefully. I still to this day, if there's a row of police officers or if there's just police in general, I start shaking a little bit and I get very, very nervous, and I'm able to control it to some level, but there's certainly been times where I'm just like, nope, I'm gonna nope out of this situation and kind of either walk down a different way or whatever. But I mean, just things like it affects, and I know I have to kind of prevent myself because I have that immediate wall. Like so, I moved to Alaska in 2013 after covering like 2 years worth of protests, and 2010 to 2012 in New York City was very good time to cover protests if you were looking for them, and the amount of like run-ins and different things like that I had during that time period. I immediately, first thing I do is I cover an event that had a couple cops at it because there was a senator speaking there or whatever, and immediately I go into full like New York City police officer, you're dealing with this person and you have to immediately kind of affirm that you're a member of the media and that you're just don't give them the time to kick you out of the area or do whatever, which is kind of the only way you can kind of deal often with police officers in those kind of high tense situations. And the friend of mine from Alaska who's the blogger, really well known there, was immediately like, Zach, take a chill pill, just asking who you are because you have a big camera and you don't have any, I don't even know if I had credentials around my neck at that point because it was like open event, so I wasn't going there full credentialed and everything like that. And he was fine, and then they were fine, and then after that, every time in Alaska, I was just like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, let me through, and kind of when I was there, it was perfectly fine. and then immediately I go back to New York and kind of covering the stuff again, and kind of immediately go back into that mode. So I mean, I still have that scenario. I mean, like I've been with you, Abe, on at some of the big rallies, and at the Trump rally that I just covered in Columbus, there was just more hatred that I've dealt with, probably that I can think of, between two people. Between I was dead in the middle of a mob of anti-Trump and Trump supporters screaming at each other at the top of their lungs, kind of the worst things that you could kind of think of to yell at those particular people. If they were white and a protester, that's what they yelled at each other. And if they were black and a protester, that's what was getting yelled at him. You know, and it's like one of the big problems that people I don't think realize is that as journalists, why we're very hardened, why we drink often. Which I wish I got your advice, that your mom's advice. I have a direct connection. Immediately I go home after every night of Occupy. I was just like, I have to have a drink because it's the only way that I'm going to pass out, so that I can wake up and go to the camera store job that I had and then cover this thing again. But the problem is that why we're so cynical and why we don't expect anyone are ever going to treat us right, or whoever. I think a lot of us are. Maybe you're not. I don't know. Is the fact that we're literally paid to see the worst in everyone. 9 times out of 10, if we're sent somewhere, it's probably not because there's kittens.
I think
there.
I need you to come on a Momenta nonprofit workshop, because we're trying to teach people to see the best in each other.
I mean, I would love it. I was looking at your page. I'm like, I really could use that. But I mean,
you need to go cover something like animal rescue or something.
I would love to. I work as my other jobs as a journalist is not just a photographer. I work as an investigative journalist, and I work in corporate crime and election theft and kind of international issues along those lines. Like my biggest story of the past couple of years, I'm working about this thing called vulture funds, where people literally, businessmen literally, vulture funds take African, basically aid money, keep it for themselves because of colonial debt. So it's like my day, I go home, people are like, I try to talk to them, and I don't even want to talk. Most people, I have friends basically that work in journalism, and my lighthearted work is I luckily work for comicbook.com, and I look for a comic book website.
Have you read comic books? They're incredibly violent and all about the darkest parts of us. Come on now.
It's my relief, so that people talk about it'd be funny. It's like I go to a convention and then people be like, oh, it's really high stress or whatever. I'm like, dude, yesterday I photographed a kid getting hit in the head with a baton and blood. It was everywhere. I'm like, Stan Lee's right there. Are you kidding me? This is fantastic. But
I think what you're saying, though, speaks a lot to, this problem that we as a culture of journalists have in this very, judgmental way. Speaking of, alcoholism, I have seen photographers who, there's someone who's in recovery. They'll be like, oh yeah, well, he's an alcoholic, so we can't ever socialize with him. And it's like, I'm sure he'll be fine and tell you if he has a limitation. And the same thing is true. If you have a serious anxiety, we should be comfortable. My God, we're all a family. This concept, and part of what Momenta, the hashtag Momenta family is out there because we're supposed to be a family to each other. If we can't talk to each other about some of the shit that we have to photograph and some of the stuff that we've seen, who else should we be able to talk to? And as someone who has to hire people for Momenta Creative quite a bit, I want to know limitations. I want to know if you're pregnant and if you're having morning sickness, because I don't want to send you to an assignment where you're going to, chuck in front of the person that you have to photograph. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to hire you anymore. It just means I'm not going to give you an 8 a.m. assignment for the next 6 months. Yeah. But at the same time, I think it's also good to know, I specifically told somebody during the inauguration one year, I do not want to stand outside anymore on a platform. Can you send me to do anything else? Because I've been standing outside to do all this coverage forever. Can I do something else? And they were like, yeah, oh my God, everybody wants to be on that platform. Will you go cover the business side of like what happens when 50,000 people descend on your city? And I think when we are open with editors and when editors understand this and they know what your limitations are, it makes you a better photographer for sure. It makes, all of us better to be able to be honest with each other. And as a family, I'm really glad that the Petapixel community has come out and been so grateful for, the brave stance.
Which is really, really surprising. That was the one thing, Abe, I gotta say, when I saw that you published it on Petapixel, I was like, oh, I'm just not going to touch the comments because I don't know if you guys read Petapixel a lot. They'll do a blog about a flash review, and there's like hatred, just like oozing hatred. It's like YouTube comments, like on anything. So I mean, you know that, right? I mean, I say this all the time. I'm like, it's a great article. Don't read the comments. This one actually, there's obviously a bunch of just ass clowns, to put it nicely, on this post. But then there's almost every single time there's a guy commenting on that comment saying, shut up, you don't know, you don't understand, and being like, I have similar feelings or similar issues. So it's like actually one of those moments where I'm like, oh, there are humans. There are humans.
Every once in a while they do come out. Yeah, I read a couple of those, and yeah, there were some bad ones. But yeah, mostly positive, people coming out and saying, that they felt the same way or they were giving you support. So it was good to see that. My only experience when I was working in New York City with the police was pretty sedate, pretty mild. I never really shot protests too much, but for what I did shoot and my interactions with the police, they were pretty tame. One time I had an officer threaten to take away my press badge, the state-issued press badge. But beyond that, as long as you kind of kept out of their way, and I wasn't putting myself in extremely sort of antagonistic environments, where they were prone to be short-tempered. Most times it was just sort of street photography and whatnot, or movie sets or something like that, where they're sort of just there because, the city is being paid by the film company to provide the actors some protection and stuff like that. So I kind of just, stayed out of their way. Moved where I was, wasn't going to be a huge bother, and they didn't really care. But I will say
that. Were you in the military?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we have a huge love and connection through Syracuse, of course, with the military, and
my old alma mater, military photojournalism program.
Love the MPJs. I was the TA for the MPJs.
Oh wow.
But it was right around when I was back in school, back in the dark ages at the turn of the last century, that, post-traumatic stress in the military was being talked about a lot more. And I remember when 9/11 happened, in fact, a lot of the military photojournalists were the ones who were coming out and talking to the civilian photojournalists about post-traumatic stress disorder and going into combat when we had so many embedded journalists. And I think this dialogue is really important to explain to people that it's not just war zones that create this type of fear and anxiety in certain people, and it's not just post-traumatic stress, it's not just claustrophobia, it could be a number of different things that can cause this type of stuff, and the fact that everyone's being a lot more open about it is really encouraging, I think.
Yeah, it's all thanks to you, Abe. Thanks a lot. But I will say, not talking about like PTSD or anything, but the most, I would say, emotional I've ever gotten while doing the job of photography was when I was working as a street photographer in New York City, trying to document celebrities. And if you've ever done that sort of work, it's very, very much similar to kind of being in a war zone, in a sense where it's hours and hours of nothing happening, and then a short burst of a few seconds when something does happen. And I felt no greater highs and no lower lows doing that job. The highest highs when I get that, shot of a celebrity, walking someplace, and I was the only person to get it. That's an extremely good feeling. And then, of course, the lowest low is when you miss that shot because of either your own incompetence or some other photographer gets in your way. Because in that job, it's a freelance job, so you're paid only when you sell. So if you don't get something, it's like, well, there goes any money I was going to get out of that entire day waiting for, some celebrity to walk from their hotel to their car because some, idiot walked into my shot, or their bodyguard is being overzealous and, doesn't want any photographs taken of the celebrity, even though 90% of the time they hire they get their PR people to tell certain agencies where they're going to be so they can get photographed walking on the street, but that's beside the point. Anyways, yeah, so much emotion, like literally heart beating out of my chest certain times when either I did get the shot or incredibly depressed when I didn't get the shot. So if you talk about PTSD, there's some stuff just from working on the street as a photographer. Yeah, so see, we all have emotions. We're all human.
Yeah, just got to talk about it and not be afraid of repercussions.
Yeah.
No, it is what it is. But either you grow and you move on, or it's something you have to deal with. And but we're all here to help you out. We're all here to help each other out around the Lens Therapy Hour.
Gets suddenly very quiet. We're all sniffly.
I wish I had a sound effect I could play to lighten the mood.
No.
But all right. Well, unless there's anything else about
that widget
this.
away from you, Dave. I'm gonna go into your computer and take that widget, that Google widget, away from you. So there's just no chance in the middle of something like this you go womp womp womp.
All right. Maybe I'll save something for the end. It'll be a surprise. All right, so let's lighten the mood a little bit and talk about gear during our Gear Talk segment here. So Sony announced some wireless remotes for their flashes. Sony's been making a lot of strides recently with their camera systems and have been actually enticing photographers who've used Canon and Sony gear, Canon and Nikon gear for years to actually come over to their camera systems. So, naturally they're branching out their accessories, and they've created a wireless remote and a flash. So, my question to you guys isn't so much what do you think of this gear, although if you have opinions on it, feel free to throw them in there. But, what do you think about wireless flash setups? Is that something you've ever done? Because obviously we're visual journalists, We're not working necessarily like in a studio environment. We're working out there in the street or, at news events and stuff. Have you had any experience working with wireless flash? Is this something you keep around in your kit? What are your thoughts on this? Anybody? Abe? You go.
I don't know any working journalist who doesn't use flash in creative ways.
No, I'm more talking about wireless flash. So I'm talking about setting up a flash, like a remote flash in a remote location. Has this been something anybody's ever done for either their news work or just documentary storytelling or what?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about you guys, but when I was doing daily news, I had to shoot probably a dozen portraits a week, if nothing else. This person over here, this person over there. The wireless mic, the wireless flash set that I had was really, really important. And I actually loved when I finally got a remote system that I could just run to news assignments, and I had like a newswear belt system, and I would have it just right there, so I could just hold it up and sorry, I guess I'm in the screen somewhere here. I'd hold it up over here and just still be able to shoot and have it, in my left hand. And even on news assignments, I think that's vital.
I've used a lot of off-camera flash. Of course, have that big cord, or sometime having the wireless cord. But have you guys used that? And if you have, what about like setting up flashes in like various locations or multiple flash work? How about that?
I have actually not used my own system, but I did take a Pocket Wizard 2A Bucks game that I was able to cover and just kind of stole the flashes already in-house by finding the right radio channel. So I was able to do that, and that was nice. But otherwise, I really, it's one of those things that I need to learn. But quite honestly, I have no clue where my flash is right now. That's how little I use it.
Yeah, I have, if I go, so now that I have a car finally, and so I can kind of have like I can bring a lot of stuff, but I only just recently started actually occasionally using my flash, and I've used a macro flash occasionally for like close-up portraits when I was experimenting with that sort of stuff, but honestly, I guess it goes back to my film days when I used to make sure I would shoot with the highest ISO film I could find. I despise it. I did really, really badly in my studio class when I was at SU, and I just always found it so frustrating because I could just literally just never get it to work. It was terrible when I worked at B&H Photo, and people were like, "Okay, so can you explain to me how to use this?" And I just be like, you know who he does? He's our studio expert over here. And I'm like, I know how to pull, not how to make a good photo usually out of any situation without a flash if you need ever help with that. But God, I mean, I never use it anymore. I really, really should. I should spend a couple assignments and kind of just, expect them to not do well, and use and relearn how to use the flash. Especially, I have a really good SB800, which works really well. The few times I've actually tried to use it for like eBay photos, but
so you don't use the flash for any protest photography, right? Or is it just all natural light?
No, never. I can't ever see using it for protest photography just because it. I mean, I'm very much like, to me, the flash changes the moment completely, and people react to it. And especially the way that protests are now, Abe probably can back me up on this, is that anything that kind of singles you out as a kind of professional journalist, I stay away from. Obviously, I have my big camera gear and everything like that, but I try to slide in, take my photo as quick as humanly possible, and then move on. Luckily, I very rarely have to talk to people or interact too much. So it's not like I have to like stop the moment or anything like that, or even ask for like kind of names and situations, because in protest you're just not going to usually get names ever. I mean, you're lucky that somebody doesn't yell at you for taking their photo at this point, so or threaten you, like I had a bunch of times at Ferguson. So yeah.
Well, probably on my bookshelf right behind me is, we always take Joe McNally's the Hot Shoe Diaries with us whenever we go on workshops, because being in DC, I mean, everyone lives and dies by flashes, so there's a lot of remotes set up everywhere. There's, anytime you see the president like walking down the colonnade in the White House, people are trying to get different remotes set up and things like that. But we, even in nonprofit photography, like we lit, I did not do this. I cannot take credit for this. This was all Chris Anderson from Momenta in the other office, but he took one of our photographers and they set up, I think, 7 different remotes in a house at night in New Orleans in the lower 9th, that was just being built, and it was super cool, and they were just like a million. They gelled 2 of them, and it was just stunning. I mean, just really stunning work. And they were just doing it just to like mess around one night because they wanted to learn how to use remote flashes. But since we're talking about Syracuse and learning flash, I think this concept of community, and one of the things that we're always trying to build with Momenta, is this this belief that we learned at Syracuse that photographers need to learn from each other, and we should stop being so ridiculously competitive with each other because we all have a different vision and a different eye, and we need to help each other learn. And so when we were at Syracuse, there was a photographer, Barbara Salisbury, who started a like Thursday night potluck where the photographers would come together and we would learn something new. And one night we lit her living room to F8 with like 6 flashes, and everybody was like bouncing them into the corners of the wall, so the corners would act like umbrellas, and everyone was using different radio slaves and stuff like that at the time, and it was just a great way for us to all get together and be a community and learn from each other. And the potlucks always carried something different with it. We just did a lot of Flash because we didn't learn a lot of Flash in undergrad, and nobody really, knew what the heck we were doing. And so I would highly recommend any photographers watching this. Like, it's a lot of fun to get 6 people together with, 6 bottles of wine and Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever it is that you all bring together and learn how to use the Flash. And the Hot Shoe Diaries by Joe McNally is so awesome. We'll just take it and open it up to a page that shows like how the whole setup is, and we'll just hand it to one of our students and be like, here, go. Try this on your next assignment. Goodbye. Have a good day.
Yeah, it is a great book. And speaking of alcohol,
Googling it.
I went from SUNY Purchase Film School to the Syracuse art photography program, and so I was super freaking pretentious when I was there. I think it was 2001, 2002.
We were there at the same time.
Oh God, were you in the art program or were you in the Newhouse?
I was in Newhouse.
Oh, okay. Well, can't talk to you then.
Let's go. We had a joint. Were you part of the joint photo show that we did together?
God, I don't know. I mean, I was so out of the loop. Like, I was obsessed with, at that time period, kind of the Dogma 9/5 school, Lars von Trier, like the nothing, no aesthetics, nothing whatsoever. So like, I only shot with whatever. And what was terrible is that Laura Heyman, who's a fantastic professor there, who unfortunately I was not a good student, as good student as I should have been when I was there, like completely encouraged me at it. She's like, because she was very much in that kind of kind of that idea, very arty too. And the art photography school was very, kind of very studio driven and kind of like, okay, you should go get a job in photography afterwards. And Laura Heyman was like, you should go get a grant and show at the Whitney, sort of school of photography. And it encouraged me straight away when I was like, yeah, so I really want to develop my color Kodachrome 16 millimeter as single images. Do you know a way I can do that? And she's like, got all excited, and like we spent like an entire class period trying to figure out how to do it properly within the lab situation. So I did not learn a lot of things that I should have. I know how to light for film pretty well, but I don't know how to light at all for photography. So, yeah.
I've only ever messed with remote flashes more than just playing around. I mean, I'm kind of like you, Zach. I like to do natural light, using really only flash when I'm in a dark situation and I need some sort of light. But mostly I've used flash for mostly ceremonies and events I've shot. Very rarely for actual news type work, just because it's, you're moving around, you're shooting something that's very dynamic, and it's usually outdoors. So unless you want that nice sort of blasted, flat, undramatic light on somebody's face, you're not really using flash too much. But I do like the idea of the remote flashes. We played around a lot with flash in Syracuse, and I remember one of the students in my class was trying to do this gargantuan multi-flash setup with in a firehouse with like all the firefighters standing and doing a pose, and like that one of those poses where everybody's in sort of different places in the picture, and just like flashes everywhere. I don't think it ever came out, but we tried. We were having fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, remote flashes. At the very least, I would recommend having one in your kit. Like you said, Jamie, you had one in your kit. So, I mean, if you ever, I know a lot of working photojournalists have to get, obviously, like I said, those portraits, to go along with their story. So, yeah, if you can do a little remote flash setup, 2 flashes, 3 flashes, you're going to obviously be able to create a much more dynamic portrait, I think.
But with the new Sony the new Sony A7 II R or whatever it is system, you could literally just put a candle next to the person's face in a pitch dark room and get perfectly fine lighting.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's just like 8 billion ISO or something like that. So.
Or with the Nikon D5 and it's 3.2 million ISO.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of like being able to shoot in low light situations. I think it's just being able to, if you want to control the light, if you want a specific light for your subject.
Just hold an iPhone up to the person's face. And
yeah, sure.
I've done portraits like that before. So when I was at Occupy, I would shoot it shoot on a 30mm 1.4 and hold a cell phone on the bright setting up to the person's face. It came out gorgeous. So
Yeah, how many times do you see a photograph, where it's somebody holding, looking at the phone, and then that's the light you use to illuminate the person, and that creates the dramatic picture you're trying to, just them, on their phone, and the lights light up their face, and that creates a dramatic picture,
Yep.
And so that's a testament to how great cameras are nowadays with their low light sensitivity.
I am excited, though, to see more and more that the name brands are making this themselves. Instead of having to buy the Pocket Wizard to put on your flash, get a receiver, get a sender, however it works. I'm excited to see that they're at least jumping on board with this program. I got the SU800 macro back when I thought that I could photograph bugs and didn't realize that, I couldn't. So I got that, and I played around with the little flashes and the Commander. I'm like, I don't understand. It has to see it, and you got to have a cord, and it just seemed so ridiculous at the time. And now it's like, oh, well, at least they're building it in. I'm not sure with this Sony one. I looked at it, but I know with the new Nikon one that you still have to have something attached to your camera that you purchase extra. So hopefully we'll get to a point where it can just talk from the camera to the flash itself.
Well, I believe that's actually in the latest version of Nikon cameras. I'm not sure which cameras are doing it, but I know I believe a Nikon or a Canon that actually have the transmitter, the wireless transmitter built in. So you just have the camera and the flash. So all you have to do is get, shell out about $6,000 for a Nikon D5, another $1,000, $500 for a lens, the camera, or the flash, and you're good. So
that's all. That's all.
Yeah.
You can afford that on a freelance photographer salary, right? No problem.
Yeah. You know what? Also, give away your work for free.
Oh yeah.
Spend thousands of dollars on equipment and give it away for free.
You guys need to read John Harrington's book, I tell you. Take a Momenta Business Skills Workshop. We have like one-dayers, and then read John's book cover to cover, and you'll be amazed.
There you go.
I don't think I've ever heard John complain about the price of a camera. That's why I feel like he's the best guru around.
Cool. Oh, by the way, I've been looking at this the entire time. Do you have a pillow on your bookshelf that says H Heart M? Is that right?
It actually says Ohio, and the O's is of the state. My mom got it for me, so it's in my office.
Okay. Cool.
So whoever just had a bad Columbus, Ohio experience, I sincerely apologize for my Buckeye State. People normally at protest rallies don't always speak for the rest of the folks.
No. Well, not in a Trump one, and I know. I actually have a lot of friends in Ohio. It's fine.
Okay, good.
It's not my first experience with Ohio, so you guys have a lot of stolen elections. So I go there often. So yeah.
Yeah, Trump is a unique guy, and we'll have to have some sort of special episode in the future where we talk about Trump rallies.
Yeah,
but
maybe someone will have to actually figure out and schedule that out. Yeah.
Someday. We'll see if we can make that happen.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and roll out the show, close it up, and go and throw out our picks of the week. Abe, would you like to start?
Yes, I would. Give me a second here. My pick was about a photojournalist working with policymakers, and it asked, should I feel dirty? And I read the article. I had a bad mindset going in. I'm like, the hell do you think you're doing? I just couldn't separate. But he explains how, instead of the ideological just going to go out there, I take a picture, people see it, and oh my God, the world changes, that, sometimes you need to actually just dig further. And I guess I've had a bad experience with local activists just pushing their message instead of trying to push the entire story. So to see how he did that with his documentary was really an eye-opener for myself, and something that I think is worth people taking a look at. We don't have to just take the pictures. We can actually help change things if you invest the time and effort into it, but still be careful about not pushing that boundary. And hey, it changed me.
Great, great. Jamie, you hinted at earlier. What can we expect? What's your pick of the week?
Well, mine isn't a news article necessarily, but if you go to Sophia Nahli, which is Nahli Allison.com, she has a beautiful piece called Erasing a Name, Stories of South Central. It's a portrait series that she did with people in South Central Los Angeles neighborhoods, and she has audio recordings that go with the portraits and personal narrative stories, and it's just beautiful. It's really her whole portfolio is just lovely. Her recent portrait of her mother is, very sensitive and lovely, but this kind of speaks to my affinity for audio. I just think that audio and stills are such a neat way to tell stories. So that's my pick of the week.
Great. I'll throw that link in the show notes. Can you repeat it again? I think just say the URL again.
It's Sophia Nahli Allison is her name.
Okay. Great. Zach, what do you got for us this week?
It's not so much just one story, but I was surprised to find out, and I only found this out through they bought a couple of my photos, that Yahoo Politics actually has a crazy amount of photo blogs when it comes to like politics and everything like that, and just seeing like a lot of the behind the scenes. Usually you just see that one photo of like somebody speaking at a podium, but they actually have kind of covering things, like they have an entire photo essay on Trump Mania, which is like all the different characters that show up at Trump rallies, and just a whole bunch of things. And I was surprised because I never you don't really think about Yahoo, at least, as a kind of a news site. I mean, I know they are, but did not know that they were that intense into photos, and I'm happy to see that. So.
Well, I mean, in a sense, it kind of actually makes sense because they own Flickr.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's all about photos.
That's a great thing too, is that it's set up just like how Flickr is set up now. So it's huge photos. You scroll down. It's not like blog like it is on most sites. And It's just you just keep scrolling and you see the big photos of each one. And yeah, it's I'm super happy the way that they laid it out. I wish more sites would do it.
Actually, Zach, I just took a look, and there's the saying goodbye to Nancy Reagan. Third photo in is actually a Marine in front of the casket and off-camera flash. So that ties into what we're talking about.
Yeah, I see that photo too. Yeah.
If you want to set yourself apart, go get some off-camera flash action going on, or learn how to use your flash, Zach.
Yeah.
So my pick of the week, since the NPPA has kind of become our de facto unofficial sponsor. Although they can become our official sponsor if they want. Wink, wink, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. They put out they create a new site to do all their like competitions and stuff. So if like you have all those clip competitions and whatnot every month and quarterly and the annual competitions, they've consolidated that onto one website, competitions.nppa.org. So if you are a working photojournalist and you want your stuff out there being recognized, you can now go to one source, at least with regard to the NPPA, to submit your stuff. So go check that out if you you produce awesome work on a regular basis and deserve to be recognized for it. Go submit your stuff there. I haven't submitted anything myself, but at least having a central website I think will make it a bit easier to both get your stuff out there and have it archived for reference later on. That's my pick of the week. So, audience, we'll go panelists. First of all, I want to say we have 3 viewers right now. I hope we have 3 unique viewers, and it's not my 3 panelists looking at the YouTube link. But this is the most viewers we've ever had live. So thank you, 3 viewers.
Preface that it's on the live one, not on the show itself. But
yes. We're talking about 3 live viewers. Okay, I've never seen a live viewer. Yeah, so this is 3, so this is a huge milestone. We had 5 at one point, but anyways, so I want to say thank you for watching the show live if you are live. And of course, I want to thank all our audience for ever listening to our show ever live after it's been recorded via video on audio. We truly appreciate your patronage, and we hope that you will write comments and rate us and do all the things that hopefully make the show a little bit more public and people see it. Tell a friend, get the word out there. But for our panelists, why don't you go and please throw out links for where our audience can reach you.
Go ahead.
Go for it, Abe.
Oh, all right. You can find me Facebook, VDC Photo News. You can find my website is vdcphoto.com. Twitter, I don't know what it is. Probably VDC something. And Instagram, it's VDC Photo. And that's pretty much my whole branding.
Nice.
You can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook, and you can find Momenta at Momenta Workshops on Facebook. We have a page, and there's also a staff profile. And we're on Instagram, Pinterest, Google+, Twitter, and it's all at Momenta or Momenta Workshops. And if you do follow our feeds, we actually don't put out a ton about our workshops. We'll let people know when there's scholarships or discount opportunities or something like that, but it's pretty much all industry news, and so we try to make sure that anything that's going on Momenta Workshops is about really inspirational photography, educational opportunities, different podcasts that people should be watching or listening to. And if you follow Momenta Creative, which is at Momenta Creative, that is our small business profile. So you can follow small business news and learn about different entrepreneurial techniques and different ways to make your business a little bit more profitable and manageable and inspirational. So thanks so much for following us. And just as a tiny little teaser, Momenta's got a really big announcement that's coming up in the next month. So I would highly recommend everybody keep following, because there's some pretty cool stuff that's going to be going on in our company this year.
Cool. Well, we will be on that, and
thanks.
When this bomb drops, as I like to say, maybe you can come back on the show and let us know about it.
Yeah, love to.
All right, great. And by the way, you guys have been around for, you said, 10 years, right?
We're going into our 10th year, yeah.
So, you talked about Pinterest and Facebook and everything else. Did you guys have a MySpace page back in the day? Was there a Momenta Workshops MySpace page?
I don't think so. We even tell people on Google+, sorry, I know we're at a Google Hangout right now, but we don't really check it, but we do put the feed out there because we know that there are people following. The Pinterest board is actually kind of fun. It's more of our fun thing. And we're on Instagram too, of course. And we do a really cool series with guestagramming, where guest photographers come in and get to share their work, from our students, especially. They get to share some of the stuff that they worked on with us. But I don't think we ever had a MySpace page. I don't think we were on Foursquare, Reddit, or anything like that. We tried to stay in the visual world.
You should get into the Snapchat. That's what you should get into next.
Yeah. Snapchatting from our workshops would actually be pretty hilarious. I'm not going to lie. You could see people editing and crying.
Hey, they have a journalist that they hired, at least one journalist, as far as I know. I think they have a couple now. Snapchat did. So it's actually kind of crazy how many journalists that I know, especially younger ones, do a lot of work there. Tim Pool, for one, I know he does a lot on there. I still don't. I tried to have my 15-year-old sister explain it to me, to no luck. She's like, well, you do this and you send a photo, and I'm like, but why would people care? Why would people follow, and how would a news person? She's like, I don't know.
You're showing your age. I think we all are.
Well, we're gonna have a whole episode on Snapchat at some point in the future.
I think so, yeah. Just a
there
bunch
is
of
merit. There is merit to it, but I haven't found the merit yet. I don't have the time for it. But
just a bunch of people over the age of 30 going, I don't know what this thing is. It's on the phone now.
Kids these days and their photographs that expire.
You mean you have the internet on your phone now? That's my old Jewish person complaining about something.
Oi!
Let's
Zach,
not.
where can people find you?
Right here. See, around obviously anywhere around the lens. But zdroberts.com, zdroberts on Twitter, on Facebook, and you know what? I'm going to start up a MySpace page, because if you've gone to MySpace lately, it is actually gorgeous. They actually redid the whole thing. Oh, go to MySpace, everybody!
That's
right
your
now.
pick.
Go to MySpace. It is really, really good. It looks gorgeous, and I'm actually surprised that it hasn't made a comeback.
wow.
So, but isn't it? Thank you.
Yeah.
Doesn't it look nice?
I need you to set the official Around the Lens MySpace page after this. Okay.
We could be huge on MySpace. We'll get like 34 people on there. See?
Heck yeah.
Just as a photographer, it's a really nice thing.
People.
Just make sure at the end of on the description of this, everybody stick around for the last 10 minutes where Zach goes on a 5-minute rant about how awesome MySpace is, and shows the fact that he's 34.
I'll be 35 at the end of this month, just so everybody knows.
How am I the oldest person on this?
Oh.
I don't know. It happens.
26.
Hey, so you can find me personally. If you want to reach out to me personally, you can go to djmphoto.com or anything DJM photo related. But of course, I'm going to push the aroundthelens.com, our new website that we got up. It's where you'll find all the episodes of the show. In addition, we'll have a lot of different new stuff coming out, articles, areas, strictly for stuff coming, our panelists. So if you want to, pay attention what the panelists are doing after the show in terms of articles they're putting out, things that they're producing, the website will be sort of the resource for that. So go to the website if you want to catch up on all the old episodes. We are going to put all the old episodes on YouTube as well as audio files if you want to listen to via YouTube if you're more comfortable with that. But of course, you can download you can subscribe to the show via iTunes or via direct feed. So please subscribe to the show, like the show, favorite it, comment, share it, thumb up, whatever you gotta do. Just do it on the social thing. Let us do that. That's how we get paid. That's how me and Zach get paid.
Open up your windows. We get we get paid?
Well, we get paid in exposure. We get
okay.
David
exposure. My friend.
I was gonna say even people just open up their windows and scream at their neighbors. However you want to publicize it, that's the way.
Yell it out the window. Whatever you gotta do, just forcibly go on people's computers and type in the address.
We just got to get somebody to run up on a stage at a Donald Trump event now and scream Around the Lens podcast, and we'll be in like Flint.
Zach, do that next time.
Yeah, right. I like my life.
You need to get choked out by like a Secret Service agent wearing a shirt that has a website on it.
I don't work for Time magazine. It won't end as well.
Absolutely. That's how Time photographers get treated. Imagine how you would get treated. Oh
exactly.
Man.
Yeah.
You'd probably get like thrown across the room. It would be horrible.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's our show for this week. Thank you, Marcus. What am I saying?
Marcus?
Marcus, we gotta
Is
have
there somebody else on the line that we didn't know about?
Where's Marcus?
Marcus, come on!
No, Marcus DePola. Yeah, I know he's on the show every once in a while. But
He was one of our first guest or second guest? I don't even know. But he's busy at the Trump rallies thing. Got me all thinking about him. No, thank you, Abe. Thank you, Jamie. It's been wonderful having you guys on the show. I really appreciate the time that you spent talking with us this evening. For Zach, I am Dave Murphy, host of Around the Lens. Thank you all for listening, and have a great night.
Thanks.